Hey everyone, and welcome to another Kano Reviews. Today we look at a very obscure game ironically titled Obscure. It was created by a French studio and released in the EU in 2004 and America in 2005. The game had a very original concept, though in my research, not as original as I first thought. The onset of the game is that it's a survival horror game in the old style back in the late 90s and early 2000s. This means a fixed camera angle, where your character controls a bit like a tank, and where it's important to conserve ammo and medicine while trying to keep your saves at a minimum, since you can only have a limited amount of. The game very clearly takes inspirations from classics like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Some of the puzzles are very Silent Hill-esque, and the combat and saving system are much in the style of Resident Evil. But what made this game so unique, or so I thought, was the implementation of co-op. You could plug in a second controller and walk around the world with two players, sharing weapons and health items as you tried to clear the game. There are a total of 5 characters to choose from, and you can swap characters on the fly. Each character has a unique ability, where one can for example sprint faster than the others, while one particular girl has a strong melee attack and another different character picks locks very quickly. This is very cool and does make different characters worth playing for certain situations. What disappointed me a bit is that I thought that this game came out before the co-op game Resident Evil Outbreak, which had exactly the same setup but even bigger. It was in the same style of the horror game that you played in co-op with 4 people at once online. I hoped in a way that this game came out earlier, because Obscure is quite rough around the edges. But I would have liked them to be the first to make this, and despite being a bit of a mess, still be ahead of its time, much like Jurassic Park Trespasser. But alas, it came out pretty late at the end of the PlayStation and Xbox lifecycle, and isn't as unique as I thought. But let's take a more deep dive into this game then. The setting of the game is a high school, where the school officials are performing experiments on some of the students, creating grotesque monsters that differ from small to filling entire rooms. The creature design is pretty cool, with tentacles and skulls showing as their bodies have been horribly disfigured with boils, scabs, and plenty of pus. The outset in and of itself plays more like a typical teen school movie, reminiscing of American Pie or Scream. The characters you can choose from are your typical archetypes: the jock, the delinquent, the nerd, the good girl, and the tough chick. The intro starts out a little slow, where the first 10 minutes only one person will play, but soon after, you are always at least with 2 people so a partner can join whenever. If you play alone, you can be accompanied by one other character of your choice, who then will be controlled by the AI, so you never have to feel entirely alone. When playing multiplayer, the camera will still only be fixed on one player, but you can change who it focuses on by pressing one button. The camera angles are wide enough to where the other person can freely move around and knows what's going on. I have 2 main points of critique of the game, and one is the item inventory management, which is just not very intuitive. You have to press all kinds of buttons at the same time and scroll through multiple sections to get something done. Whenever you are attacked or under pressure, it can work against you, and not in the sense that it evokes fear or panic, but rather frustration. In the first part of the game, you look through the main school to find more people and unravel what exactly is happening. In the beginning, you don't have a gun yet, and the only weapons at your disposal are melee ones like a bat or a steel pipe. These are not ideal for taking on the enemies, as you will take damage in the process. But a cool feature that they added is that the creatures die very quickly to sunlight. Thus, if you smash in the windows in classrooms, the creatures step into that light that evokes from the window, they die instantly. Each classroom has at least 1 or 2 goodies to collect, from ammo to a note or an item you need to proceed the main quest. It's always clear what your next main destination is, and there are some real cool things that you can do in co-op that also promote communication between you two. There are vents in certain rooms that hold some goodies, but you first need a screwdriver. It really encourages you to explore and look in every nook and cranny. Luckily, one of the characters can tell if there's still items worth picking up in the room that you're at. That came in really handy, and other times we had one of us switch to the character who could lockpick quickly, as that is really a godsend when a tough enemy is chasing you through the halls. Combat works exactly like it does in Resident Evil, where you put up the gun with one of the triggers, and the character automatically aims at the enemy if it's nearby. You then proceed to press the fire button to unleash on it. It just felt very cool to us to play such an old school feeling horror game in co-op. If the idea of playing a Resident Evil or Silent Hill with a buddy appeals to you, then I have to say that yes, it is exactly as fun as it sounds. Presentation-wise, the game is not that special. It doesn't look ugly and actually has some physics-based interactive objects, but the game won't win any beauty contests. The lip-syncing in cutscenes is also terrible, but I will say that what impressed me is that they have different cutscenes depending on what character you control. The outcome of the cutscene will always be the same, but the fact that they went through the trouble of recording the cutscene with the different characters and voice actors is a nice extra step they went through. The music that is used is also very insane. Satanic sounding choir pieces get mixed in with ominous drones or even full-blown epic scores. It's sometimes incredibly misplaced, but we could not help but to laugh and find its wackiness somewhat charming. It definitely felt very unique and is so out of place that you cannot help but to always notice the music when it came up. Also, what is cool is that there's somewhat of a permadeath system. If you lose a character, the game isn't immediately over, and you will automatically switch to one of the characters that's still alive. This means that you basically have 5 lives in single player or 2.5 in multiplayer. Now, the second major complaint I have to the game, besides the item management system, is that some enemies are put in real cheap positions in relation to the player, to where it is sometimes almost unavoidable to take damage. Resident Evil has perfected this, to where if you enter a new room, there's a chance you might not see the enemy because it's off screen due to the fixed camera angle. But they always put the enemy far away to where you can get your bearings and at least know if you have to run or have the room to engage it. More than once in Obscure, the enemy is so close to the player and already leaps at you before you have a chance to do anything, resulting in taking damage. It feels cheap and not well designed. And I think that's the main issue with the game. It has some really cool and fun mechanics that come with the co-op experience, but it all feels like a B version of a Resident Evil or Silent Hill. The fact that it's co-op is what saves it in my opinion, because if you were to play this alone, it would feel just like I mentioned, a lesser version of some great games you already know. Still, I would recommend it to those who like the appeal of a co-op horror game. Is it scary? Not really. There are a few scares and I think only 2 or so got me, but overall it's not that scary. But definitely not pleasant either. The game is usually only $5 or something, and on sale only $1.50, and it's more than enough value for that. The game is about 3 to 4 hours on a single playthrough, which is fine for such a price nowadays. What's also important to note is that the game supports local co-op only, but this is the first game me and a buddy tested with the remote play function on Steam, and it worked really well where we were able to play online. In the end, Obscure gets a 7.6. The co-op makes it to where the game is a little over average, but it's still janky and messy in many other parts, though it definitely has charm. Me and that same friend will also be taking a look at the sequel, Obscure 2. The sequel was released in 2007, so the graphics are a lot better, and I already saw that the same composer worked on that game as well, so I hope that the songs and music in that are once again as insane and memorable as in part 1.